Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. Hello, and thank you for listening. My guest today, well, I'm just going to say, I'd call him a genius. Let's first start with the fact that this is not a woo-woo episode. This is all science, medicine, research, and education. Dr. Nuzzo is joining us from New Jersey, and his CV is so long, detailed, and accomplished that I can't even begin to read everything to you. I encourage you to just go to Google and look him up, Dr. Nuzzo. I will also put a link to his extensive CV and accomplishments and inventions and awards in the notes section. It's incredible. So in our conversation today, he takes us back to, well, when things began for him in the 70s, when his process to develop what is now coined SPML started. He is the inventor of a surgery that is changing children's life, and this surgery changed Teal's life. Now, please be aware, there are many times during our conversation, which, mind you, was originally an hour and a half, where I had to ask Dr. Nuzzo to put into layman's terms what he was educating me on. All in all, it was a fascinating conversation with a wealth of knowledge. If you ever wanted to better understand cerebral palsy, well, this episode is for you. Dr. Nuzzo goes into incredible detail about his research and the mistakes he made and the incredible lessons he's learned. My mind was really kind of shattered after this conversation. So this is a long episode. Perhaps take it in bits and pieces, but if you can, listen to it to completion, because at the end, Dr. Nuzzo quite profoundly provides statements about how we look at the world and the answers we are seeking. As always, I do hope you enjoy, and let me know what you think. Dr. Nuzzo, I am so excited, really, that you have joined us today. It's been a long time coming. I'm just so excited that we're able to talk to you and understand what it is that SPML is, what it stands for, how you created it, why it's so important for your community of patients, etc. So, shall we start with what the heck is SPML?
I babble when I try to give a definition because it's really not an operation. It's an approach to operating, and it includes operative and non-operative components. And the non-operative components are as big as the operative components in their importance, because we're not really trying to change the shape of anything, although we do. We're not changing the range of motion of anything, although we do. We're trying to change the behavior, which has to do with circuitry, signals, and timing. And to get at it, you have to go after ranges of motion, and you have to go after which way things are pointing. The things that we're doing surgically are just the tools to get to the things that we really want to treat. It has to do with the fact that the body isn't just a bunch of parts that are glued together like Mr. Potato Head. Mm-hmm. They interact. And how something behaves has a lot to do with how something else is behaving at the time. So you can't deal with any one thing without dealing with the other. There's no zig that doesn't have a zag.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me back up. SPML, selective percutaneous myofascial lengthening.
Let me tell you the origin of it, because then it becomes clear.
Perfect.
When you're an orthopedic surgeon and you say, we were going to book a case for Tuesday at first case in the morning at 7:20 in the morning, out comes the table of orthopedic equipment and another table, and everything is, has been what they call spore tested, and they go through all kinds of. It's a long process to just get it in a room, and then it takes a couple of nurses and then doing all kinds of cross checking for hundreds of pieces of equipment that you might consider possibly use, because you don't want to make surgeries go long because you have to go down a hallway and sterilize something. So everything that could conceivably use is there for speed. Because of a case being canceled and me sitting out there, a trauma comes in from a car accident. We get bumped, and I'm sitting out there, and I learned that the eye room is going to be opened up. We'll take it. And I discovered in there that the eye tools were better than anything we were using. And in the meantime, I've been trying to devise my own tools that'll do the job better because everything we're using is too big. And there, the eye surgeons have everything you could possibly want. So there we are operating in the eye room, and that just changed everything. Boom, bang, one day.
Wow.
We had everything we needed. And I'd like to tell you I invented it, but I didn't discover it by accident. So when you do a case, you don't want to by accident forget to tell them that fact and then have them come out with this big table full of equipment and stuff. So we just said, we're doing percutaneous. That's how it got its name.
Okay.
It's just a description to the operating room. It was never a name of the operation. It was just a name of our equipment need.
Oh, interesting.
Right? That's how we do it. Back in those days, there was no such thing as minimally invasive surgery. We are on totally unusual ground.
So when did you?
This was 1977, 78.
Okay. Holy geez. All right.
All right. So, and what forced us in that direction? What forced us in the direction of stuff that I was a military surgeon. And there's a war going on, and I got things in my brain I wish I could get out. Bad stuff, and then you come out, but there's nothing you can't do if you're a military trauma surgeon. There's nothing you're ever going to see that's going to say, okay, can't do that. And
right. Thank you for your service.
Well, as a joke, there's this trauma surgeon joke. That the guys are working in the city with gunshot wounds and all stuff like that. He decides, okay, I don't want any more of this. I'm going to go into private practice. So the guy says, well, how are you going to treat the thyroid? He says, if you never treated them in non-trauma thyroid, he says, it's simple. I'll shoot him in the neck and then I'll operate. That's the joke.
That's not okay.
But actually, what's funny about it is there's a kind of reality into it. That the scope of what you do is so massive that bringing it down to something small can sometimes be, a little. But on the other hand, when you're dealing with cerebral palsy, if you could do something little, it makes them big. So my work in the military had me connected with public health service because I was in charge of a massive volume in the military. We actually were investigated by Congress because we were putting out 6 times the volume of Bethesda with one half the staff. And they wanted to know, how do they doing that? And the answer was logistics. It's pure logistics,
Whoa. So but that kind of led you into thinking differently about these children or adults.
Plus the military way of an outcome is not p-values in a publication and all this garbage. There's this pressure to publish, right, and they're putting their p-values on it, and it's just nonsense. The military is either return to duty or not. Mm-hmm. And a surgeon is graded by his percentage of return to duty or not. Now they know there's some people never get back to duty, but that's in the percentages. And as you go up in level of the complexity, and our level of complexity goes as high as it got.
I've got to bring you back. I've got to bring you back to that operating room.
So what I'm saying is, you get one of the things about military is things come at you from all ends. And then they said on top of that, we were in charge of the public health service, so we were doing a lot of children. And when I came to being in private practice, coming out of the military, there were certain connections that just couldn't be broken. There were things going on, and that's what led to me being asked that is there some way to deal with these children with cardiac anomalies, a whole bunch of them, kids who turn blue. But at the time, they had to do these make do procedures to get the kids grow big enough to do what they really want to do because they're too small. So in the meantime, these kids are in your exam room and they're as blue gets, squatting on the floor. And you're being told that the output from their cerebral palsy that was caused by the cardiac defect is life-threatening. Okay. So say
that again. Say that again.
A lot of cases of cerebral palsy is simply the fact they had a large septal defect and the flow was not good. The brain didn't get enough flow. So there are causes of cerebral palsy related to flow volume as opposed to oxygen level. In other words, if you pinch off the umbilical cord, you don't get oxygen.
Right.
But the flow should be good because the heart's working. So you have a good flow of non-oxygenated blood. That's one kind of cerebral palsy. But then you get kids who have a large septal defect and the brain's not getting enough flow. So areas of the brain that are furthest away from major vessel pressure are the ones that are going to kind of dry up. And that's the periventricular leukomalacia group, PVL, which is the single biggest group of kids with cerebral palsy. And it's an important distinction because this is the biggest group that we have to deal with. The kids who look like they should be able to walk, but somehow they don't. And they seem all screwed up And yet the parents, if they're around them long enough, are saying, I don't know, I've seen them do things. I don't know. The parents don't believe what they're being told because they see things from moment to moment that don't fit this, your brain is screwed up and therefore it can't do things concept. All right. So, and then I'm a guy who's got involved with engineering stuff. We teamed up with the aeronautics engineering at Rutgers, and they were sending PhD students through for us to, here's a problem. Can you solve this? And for a PhD, they would. And we gave them some really tough things, and the people from EAI helped. And we had some really tough programs where even the people from the computer companies weren't sure they could be solved, and we solved them. Because you have somebody who's dedicated full time to it, wants to get a PhD, they're driven.
And this is at the children's hospital. This is at the underutilized children's hospital.
Yeah, okay. we had probably one of the best labs on the planet doing things. And then on top of that, just because people like what you're doing, these people who are it was D'Alessio and company. Basically, they were the video engineers that set up CBS, ABC, NBC. These guys knew video inside and out. At the time, video was reel-to-reel, black and white. If you want to record it, you could record the big wheels of stuff. There were no such thing as cassettes back then. Massive amounts of information into those signals by tricks. So for example, the muscle output when you record it, it's called EMG, has the same characteristics as voice. And so any circuits that were in video for handling sound and voice could handle EMG. So we're real-time electromyography through the video signal, and we're able to capture an instantly paired, visualized playback movement with the muscle activity, which was like outrageously good.
So you just told me that the muscular output, so the energetic output of the muscles,
the electrical signal that it makes when you see us, if you were to take that signal and put it into a video editing machine, it would show up in the voice track as normal speech.
So like how I edit how I edit the voice frequencies for a podcast, it's like you can see visually what's going on in the muscle.
Exactly the same.
Interesting. Fascinating. What? How did you figure that out? Okay, we have got to talk about it.
Figure it out. You're looking at it and say, holy crap, that's the same.
So how would you then use that to affect how you treated a child?
Two things are going on simultaneously. We're getting this information. I got a kid who's 6 years of age. He's had physical therapy out the wazoo. You can't get a video of him walking because he just crumbles and you're just dragging his feet along the floor. And then you're looking at the EMG, and the EMG is all over the place. This is too big, that's too big. And you're trying to make sense out of it. The EMG doesn't make much sense. It doesn't look like it's doing something to try to make that not happen. It almost looks like the EMG is trying to make it happen. And it doesn't click. People don't, if you got a pain, you don't stick your finger into it,
Right.
So it just didn't click. And at the same time, we had these cardiac kids where we couldn't do big operations. They were anticoagulated. You couldn't put them under a general anesthesia. We're being asked by the cardiac surgeon, can you just reduce the energy output that these kids are doing, because it's literally going to kill them. Their hearts can't pump that much blood.
Right.
So I says, okay, we're not going to try to cure them. We're just going to try to make them less bad. So they're very tight. Let's just make them not so very tight. And so
they're not working as hard.
So they're not working as hard. It can be a different goal. It stopped being, can you cure this? Can you cure that? Can you straighten the leg out? Can you take the x-ray and make it normal? Take horrible and just make it bad.
So the muscles are firing just too much. It's taking too much energy.
Right. Of course, these kids look like the other kids, except that the levels are lower because these kids just can't put it out that much. They don't have a heart to actually make it happen. And that's another connection, by the way. Why are the EMGs lower in the kids with cardiac disorders? It's because they don't have the heart delivery of blood that would enable it. So there was a volume related limit. And so along come these kids, and then we're going to operate them they're anticoagulated. So I have to put fresh frozen plasma, clotting factor in with the local anesthetic so that we can make these tiny little holes to just release some of the tension. And next thing I know, my cardiac kids are running circles around my other CP kids. They're looking awfully good. Put the EMG back on them, and all that noise went away. All that, I'm calling it noise. We didn't call it noise back then. They look like EMGs are supposed to look. And I'm saying, okay, I'm seeing improvements in body parts I never touched. And I'm seeing when we're doing it on one leg, we're seeing the improvement in the other leg that I didn't do anything to. And I'm saying, okay, something's wrong here because we're seeing effects in places that we haven't dealt with directly. Somehow fixing this fixed that. There's no question about it. The kid's better because these were kids that were non-ambulatory. They're now walking all over the place like it's nothing. And so, okay, and I'm saying to myself, I got to rethink this. And then you get the kids with CP who've had a past history of something, there's always something where you worry about anesthesia. So, okay, let's treat them just like the cardiac kids. And they behave the same way. So my original thought was the kids with cardiac were improved because they were really limited by the heart, not their CP. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. We only fixed one straw.
Right.
But then we do the other kid where cardiac was not the limiting factor. It was a genetic thing where you can't give this agent, you can't give that agent. So we're doing them under the same caution, just straight local. And we introduced the idea that, and then doing what we have to do and doing as little as we can get, because that's all you can do. And then along comes this saying 6 years of CP has never walked by anybody's criteria. That kid will never walk. So nobody tries. Get him a wheelchair, blah, blah, blah. See, he hasn't walked in 6 years. Yeah. The Stanford criteria, boom. Eugene Black, who started the Stanford criteria, regretted that criteria and said so in public multiple times. He says, I was only just giving the statistics of how things were.
Right.
He wasn't setting down a blueprint for the future. That's, you have to be, when you fail, you have to say, hey, I failed. Because if you don't recognize failure, you have to do it again. By the way, that's the most important thing in a surgeon is self-criticism. If a person can't recognize that there's room for improvement, they shouldn't be doing this. So anyway, so you have to be always critical of your own thing. And I'm sitting here saying, why can't I understand this? These kids are doing better than those kids. These kids should be doing worse than those kids. It just doesn't match. Okay. Now, meantime, I'm doing work at Bell Labs. I got involved in one of their projects to develop how to send pictures over wires on telephones. It was called the Picasso project, and I got involved in that. And so early on, I'm involved in the new technology of JPEG, which at that time was being developed. And it turned out that it worked so well that the phone never caught on, because now it got so good they could just do it over the regular phone lines as the web.
Right.
So saying compression, data compression, data compression. But what does it take to decompress it? And this is when it clicked. What it comes down to be good at sending information, okay, you have to take a massive amount of information, compact it, send it as fast as you can with as little loss as possible, and then reconstruct it where it goes. You can't take massive information and just send it. The complexity of it and the energy costs exceed. Our brain already takes 20% of our energy just sitting around, looking at TV. You can't be sending massive amounts of information because you don't have enough energy in your body to support that kind of throughput. So the body has a non-digital system. It's not digital. It's chemical. Mm-hmm. We have this chemistry that goes all over the place, and what determines what goes in and what comes out is the chemical nature of the transmitter interacting with the receptors. That's why you have thousands of kinds of receptors. Learning sometimes means just changing which receptor you have, and that changes the computation. And so that's why it takes days to learn something. So what you have is instantaneous ability to compute at tremendous things. It's just enormous. But our brains, which have more neural connections than all the stars that we compute in the entire visible universe. Right. So in our heads, we have everything that we see around us being reconstructed. What you see right now is not me. You're seeing a TV picture, but in fact, you're not seeing the TV picture. What you're seeing is the reconstruction of that TV picture inside your own head as out there. That has to be built, and it's being built in real time. So your body has a thing called concentration, where the thing you're looking at is there, and the rest of it's kind of being filled in from what was there before in a vague kind of way. So your body concentrates its focus on what's at hand, and kind of gives you a vague thing over there, and it's doing this in real time. But what it has to do is from that have a model of you in there as well, as to how you're going to navigate this environment. So it has to send incremental changes to the rest of the body to keep this little animation in your head working inside that environment.
Sure. Right.
So what does this tell you? What this tells you, and this is the thing I thought. If a kid can tell me what his environment is, and he can tell me what he's doing wrong, and they all can, then that computer's working, right?
Yeah, it's just sending too much information.
Right. So it can't be the computing, because the body. If you've ever lived with my mom was blind. She, if you ever lived with a person, you know that they recruit what they lose into something else. So they have the hearing capability that just blows your brains away.
As a son, as her son, you probably didn't like that.
Oh, you never.
She can hear everything.
Oh, you couldn't hide from her.
All right. So back to computing. There's nothing wrong with the computer in this child's head.
At the top, right. The damage with there was damage, but the damage was in its ability to control the volume control, the inhibitory things, so that it can run apace with the flow of the amount of information down the spinal cord, so that the information coming in doesn't overload. The inability to turn, the volumes are too high is a thing called capping or peaking, where you chop the peaks off. And you have to use compression. Basically, the compression mechanism isn't working. So what happens? So the body doesn't want to have like one false signal, which can happen. It's not a single signal coming down that's saying do this. What's happening is a field of signals are coming down, but they have to be tightly compressed in time because they're going to come in series. What goes where is determined by where it is in time.
Okay.
For a long time, we've known that neural circuits synchronize, but the synchrony is separating what goes where. And it takes a field of signals that get averaged, and that's the signal that what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
And that's how it deals with noise. But it only can deal with noise if there's not too many asynchronous signals, because then they outnumber the other.
Right.
So the brain is sending down information, and if the noise is high, it can't decode it. So what is this like? Well, if you've ever had a video on your computer and you try to play it and you get mess, and then you say, well, the video file's broken. And somebody says, no, you just don't have the right codec to decode it. Mm-hmm. So then you download a codec, and suddenly that file, which looked like it was a mess, is perfectly fine. You just couldn't break it out. There's the cerebral palsy right there. So it's a signal to noise ratio. And now what we have to do is decrease the noise. So now we go into the operating room with this knowledge, and we have to say, where does noise come from? It comes from overstressed gamma efferents called spindle. There's little sensors in the muscles, and they gravitate to the high velocity muscles area because it has the most motion for any given thing you do. It goes further and faster and has a higher signal. So that if you want to put a sensor, that's where you put the sensors in most. So if we just go in there and not even trying to get range of motion, just take down all the high velocity components. The further something is from the center of motion, the further it has to move with any given motion that you do.
Correct.
Right. So it's a basic torque. All you have to do is know what points of this muscle are the furthest from the center. That's it. Go there. And being on the surface puts you further from center right off the bat. So there's a tendency for the body to push the stuff up to the surface. So you're going to have the areas of fastest movement doing most of the information going in. And if they're sending back noise, because their amplitude has been turned up, which is what is happening, which is where Botox actually works. Everybody thinks Botox is working on the muscle. It does a little bit, but its main action is on the high velocity receptors in the muscle that are made out of little tiny muscle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's why you don't have to go in very far.
You don't have to go in very far. No,
they're sitting right up on the surface.
Right. Now, these contractures, by the way, aren't, so the contracture of the tendon. It's not a contracture of the tendon. It's not a contracture of the myofascia. It's not by the way, that was a second bad name. When we said myofascial, we weren't saying it was of the myofascia. It was in the zone of the myofascia. All right. So in the zone of the myofascia, something that shouldn't be there.
Uh-huh. So it should be selective, non-percutaneous, non-myofascial.
But non-myofascial in the myofascial zone. Why? Right. Well, just because of the way the anatomy is, these contractures run from one end to the other as strings. We'll call them strings.
Yeah, so it's like you have the fascia that is in your tongue is connected in your ankle. I mean, it's all connected.
It's all connected, yeah. Right? So going from your hip to your tibia, crossing two joints is a muscle, but inside that muscle is a band that is not muscle, that just refuses to go. What is it? It's actually it's a high velocity responder that died and turned to fibrous tissue. These are muscle units. And sometimes, although the muscle unit is dead, the spindles, which are separate anatomy in them, are alive and screaming bloody murder because everything you do is yanking on them. So it's adding to the violence of the signal. Whoa. You're getting clarity now, right?
I think you just blew my mind. Yeah.
At the origin, this is going right down the center of the muscle. How do you find that? But when you get to the myofascia, all these things that are cords open up and come out over the surface like a harp. These fibers are just running down side by side now before they wrap themselves up again into a tendon. So that thing could be somewhere at the top end, somewhere at the bottom, and in the tendon on cross section, it could be anywhere in there. Who knows where? So if you're gonna cut an entire tendon and lengthen an entire tendon to get at that one little thing, that's a lot of stuff being cut. So you lose a lot of power for no reason. But when you come up to the myofascia, it's all been spread out like on a piece of paper. So, and now if you take a tool that was designed for moving cataracts around or lenses in eye surgery,
right?
Go in there and you just turn it this way and it's blunt and you can actually just run over that surface and one surface suddenly feels like you're plucking a guitar and it makes a sound, and how hard you pull on the leg determines what the sound is. I mean, come on. Boom, 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 boom. It makes a sound and everybody in the room can hear it.
What?
It's a cord. It's a string.
Oh my God, that makes perfect sense.
Pluck it, it makes
about
noise.
That.
Right. So,
oh my gosh. Okay.
So what do? Cut it.
That sounds really invasive, but it's really not invasive. It's so just like
so small, right? So So now you got this little tool that's blunt, but you just turn it and now it's sharp.
Sure.
These eye guys, they figured this out. So, because they don't have a lot of room to change tools in the eyeball. So they were pushed into this a long time ago. Getting a lot done with one instrument going through one hole. That's the nature of eye surgery. That's what they've been doing since the beginning. There wasn't any eye surgery until we had those tools.
Right.
You're not going to use a shoehorn on an eye.
You just lost your eye. I mean, that's really what happened.
That's right.
You just lost your eye.
So you go in there with this small instrument. So some people say, why do you have more than one hole? Because that thing only reaches so far. It was designed for an eye. And if it was any longer, it would be too flexible. So sometimes you just have to come out and make another hole to move. It just depends how many of those things you have.
Sure.
So, but for most of them, we can usually do it with just one because the skin moves.
And in one area, you look at is the groin area, the hamstring, behind the knee, behind the calf, and then the Achilles.
Because going after the signal, you have a person who says, "Oh, they have 70 degrees of range of motion." That's perfectly fine. That's at the low end of normal, but it's normal, so leave it alone. But but we say, okay, I do the hip movement fast. The slow fast test that we do. We're not really looking at the thing you're moving. We're looking at everything else.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things. You're looking at how the body's responding. Okay.
It always makes me laugh because you see people, they'll sit on one leg to test the other because the other leg keeps jumping up. But that's the answer. If the other leg is jumping up, that's a cross reflex. That means that the noise coming in from what you did was enough to trigger another body part.
That's what you showed me when Teal was on the table when she was in pre-op. You were talking about the quick fast. Nobody really knows what that means, but it's like it's a quick jerk kind of. But what you're looking at, and you showed me, you said, look, her other leg is responding. That shouldn't be happening. So you, in a very quick way, you taught me that.
Right. That only happens because I put a flood of noise in, and the noise can trigger other things. That noise is being interpreted as a signal to do something. So you have noise producing things. Now it gets confounded. Just think this through. You have a kid in the gait lab, or you're in the gait lab, and you're at one end. I say, walk to the other side. But then I'm going to say, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a thumbtack in your right shoe.
Ooh.
Now walk to the other side.
That sounds horrible.
Well, no, you're going to do fine. How are you going to do it?
On one leg or on my toes.
Exactly. Yeah. You're going to jump across the room on your left foot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you were asked to go across the room. You did it.
Yeah.
You have cerebral palsy, so therefore I'm going to sit here and die. No, I'm going to go through life. I'm going to figure out a way to get up and get it done.
Figure it out.
Kids are putting out massive amounts of compensatory tricks, and they're doing tricks that shut down the noise.
Yeah,
that's something that's a little hard to see because it took me forever to figure out that noise was even the issue. And so now you're kind of getting a sense of where SDR comes in.
SDR.
Selective dorsal rhizotomy. The neurosurgeons go in there, But the thing is, they're cutting sensory fibers.
Right.
And some kids who have sensory impairments in the more advanced cerebral palsy, where it goes out wider than just PVL, they have a lot of sensory problems. And taking down sensory fibers may reduce the spasticity tremendously, but may also leave them with insufficient sensory for position in space, so they can go like that. You have to kind of weed those kids out. So SDR can do good things. The difference in input recycling that we can get from alcohol blocks is done on the motor side, so we don't lose any sensory.
Okay.
So that's why we prefer it as a first step. Some of the kids could probably get more if they did the SDR, but do they need more? We're talking about an outpatient procedure with no scars, no nothing. The kids are up and running versus, you operate on your spine and blah, blah. I'm not putting them down.
No, I know.
Here's the thing. When they do SDR alone, they haven't gotten rid of any of these bands, and these bands are geometrically high gain producers. How do we know this? Because we did the elastic study, and it was the elastic study that finally made it make sense.
I want you to explain what the elastic study is.
Well, let me start with the range motion. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Basically, if I put something with hinges on it on your body, I can restrict how far your body part can go. I can restrict it from going into extension but not flexion. I can restrict it from going into flexion but not extension. The knee is the easiest one to understand because it's just so obvious. It sits there and very visible. We have a volunteer who's an athlete wearing braces that restrict knee movement, and we basically gave them 60-degree contractures. Any surgeon who's treating kids will tell you after 30 degrees you're doing knee damage. You have to have surgery, and we got these volunteers here with the equivalent of 60-degree contractures, and they're walking around saying, "Okay, now what do you want us to do?" We're walking them up the hospital stairs, down the hospital stairs, around the hospital, back up the stairs, and around the room, and they're walking like nothing's wrong. Okay, they did not look like cerebral palsy. We gave them contracture out the wazoo, beyond what you would accept in any kid, even if they were sitting in a chair, and it didn't even a little bit look like cerebral palsy. Of course, the engineers were happy because they're measuring all kinds of stuff, and the engineering things that they want to do, they're doing.
Right,
okay?
But you're trying to recreate what happens on a physical output level of a person with CP.
Right. I'm trying to do real science, control the variables.
Correct.
Say, okay, this is the brace is the disease. This contracture is the disease. This kid has this much contracture and that much contracture, and yet the walking looks just like you didn't do anything to him.
No toes turning in, none of that stuff. Okay, so that led you to what?
That led me to despair. I'm telling you, I was wearing a neck collar going over this data endlessly, trying to think,
what are we missing? What are we
missing? So I finally said, what if, instead of restricting the range of motion, we simply made the motion cost something? We made
energy.
Let's. The legs are pendulum. This is what we found in the range of motion study, was that no matter what, the body looked for a pendulum that can match right and left. You can't have two sides going at different speeds. You can't coordinate it. You can't have one side going step, 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 but the other side's going step, step, step. So to conserve energy, you have to be a pendulum. So now we put the elastic on, and what's going to happen is, as the person flexes and extends, that they're going to be pulling against that elastic. It's going to dampen the pendulum. Now, an interesting thing about a pendulum is it takes as much energy to make a pendulum go slow as it does to go fast. It's the deviation from its natural speed. So if you want to use more energy to get from point A to point B, you could just walk there as slow as possible, and you'll get the same amount of energy loss as if you ran it.
True.
But you won't get fatigued because you have more time to replenish. This is where the blood supply comes in. So when we did the very first attempt, this was just our very first trial. Was a trial. Let's see what it takes to actually do this, because we don't know what kind of elastics to use. So our first one, we're sitting, we're putting stuff on our first volunteer, who's just an average guy we thought the problem would be, do we have enough kinds of elastics? We don't know how much, we're basing it on pulling on kids' legs. That feels about that tight, So it's, we're trying to get a sense of it. But what we learned very quickly is our subject couldn't go any further. And our EMG that we put on, that we were going to do the measurement on, couldn't measure what we were doing, because the EMG was, in order to record more muscles, we were using paper, like you see like in the movies, like for a truth teller machine,
like a lie detector test.
Lie detector test, basically the same.
A truth teller test.
Whatever, which end you look at, you know?
Yeah. No, I know. Okay, so hold on. You were using paper?
This is a long time ago.
You're right.
And what was happening was the paper was coming out black, dripping ink. It was so violent that we couldn't record it.
So there was so much noise.
So much noise that it just shooting ink all over the place.
And what was the volunteer doing? Like passing out from exhaustion?
The volunteer was on the floor holding his chest and his arm up, waving like this, saying, I can't go any further. Stop.
And you only made him just walk a little bit.
Just walk around the room. And here he was holding his chest and he's bunny hopping over to the door frame, pulling himself up on the door frame. Couldn't get up.
And where did you put the elastics?
We tried several different things, but the one that did him in immediately was our closest that we could get to a semitendinosis.
Okay.
Why? Because in the surgery, I was finding semitendinosis was the go-to muscle for these kids with the heart thing.
Okay.
And we're going to set the tension by having the hip flex 90 degrees, and then he has to extend his knee. And we just going to see how far can he extend. That would be the 100%. And it says, okay, now we're going to put elastic on and divide that into 3 levels. From he's perfectly good to able to do it, so he can't do it at all. And then we're going to do another set of 3 with the hip only flexed 45 degrees. Then he's going to extend his knee, and we're going to divide that into 3. Because with buckles, you can only get so much refinement, you know. And then we're marking on the elastics with a magic marker where these settings are. And then we're doing it with the hip and extension. How much tension does it take to get his knee out straight so he can stand straight?
Okay.
Okay, so that was into 3. So we had mild, moderate, and severe broken into 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And then at the beginning, with none of this stuff on, just walking, that was our baseline. Then we put all stuff on, but no elastic at all. Our elastics were on, but not pulled in any tension. And those 2 looked exactly the same. So we weren't restricting ankle at all. We weren't restricting hip at all.
Sure.
Just the tension across the knee. And the hip would only be active when we put the elastic on, he's walking.
Okay. So he's passed out pretty much. He cannot do it anymore. And his muscle noise is all out.
And we're telling him, and I'm telling him, hey, guy, you got to go see a doctor because, you know, you may have some, because he was looking like the cardiac kid squatting in my office when you were blue. I'm saying, you got a cardiac problem that we don't know about. I'm saying, you know, lucky you came to us, you know, lucky you volunteered for this because we just discovered something about you.
And was that true?
No.
I know. No. That's what I was going to say. He didn't have a cardiac problem.
You think I'm smart? No, I'm just persnickety persistent.
Right. Okay. So then what happened? So you realize, holy.
But then our engineers is saying just Mike Polchaninoff. He was working for NASA at one time. He comes out and he says, you know what? I'm going to go take a pH meter apart and because in the pH meter there's a logarithmic thing, and then we're going to put that in the pathway of our signal. So we're going to measure EMG the same way they measure pH. That's in order to handle massive amounts of information on a logarithmic scale. So our second subject comes in and says, okay, now we got a guy who is a very avid jogger.
So he's fit and capable. You're expecting better results from him.
Yeah, and it turns out to be exactly the same as the first guy. And he's on the floor holding his chest. I can't go any further. I go, what the hell, you know? I got two wimps in a row. I mean, you know,
right. Let's bring in the girls. Maybe you should work with women. I'm kidding.
That was 2 to the 4th. So we finally said, okay, whatever's going on, it has to do with fatigue, it has to do with energy. We have to find a human being that's not capable of fatigue. And that's where a 9-year-old international competition championship Irish step dancer became the subject.
Right.
Her aunt's there screaming her on, and we're paying. This is okay. You got to up the ante. So we're going to pay her $100 an hour to just walk around the room. Just walk in circles around the room. That's it. Now, the funny thing with the guys, in order to grab information only at the time when it's crossing the video, we have an infrared thing and an infrared thing to trigger the you know, take the information, stop.
The noise, yeah.
They couldn't walk from one infrared to the other. They couldn't walk the distance of the video.
The people before this little girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now she's there, and we got pictures of her at pleading to stop, and we're feeding her oranges and Coca-Cola and pizza and all this kind of stuff. She just kept going, and we're saying, "Do it for Ireland, do it for the children."
Okay, so
$100 an hour.
Did you recreate the mobility? Like, could you see?
And now I'm going back and looking at the video of the first guy who we thought, well, This guy has heart disease.
Right.
What we learned was we got to get a better guy, and our equipment wasn't so good. The third study we actually did, we moved, and when we asked the engineers, what's the level of reduction of this signal? It's at least 1,000 to 1. So we're doing 1,000 to 1 reduction on the electrical signal for EMG, and we were.
What does that mean? What does that mean? You just talked gibberish to me.
You have a volume control, and it's screeching in your ears and breaking your eardrums, listening to what the muscles are doing, and you can't make out what the muscles are doing because it's just beyond. It's just a wall of howl.
Sure.
And you're turning it like Spinal Tap. You're turning it from 11 all the way down, not only to 1, but to 0.001.
Okay.
You had to do 1,000 to 1 reduction.
There you go.
To just see the EMG.
Wow.
And that's how we saw the EMG. And we were really interested, not so much one's the EMG on, because it's always on. You don't need an EMG to see it's on. Because we learned that, we want to know, when does it go off, or does it ever go off?
Does it ever go off?
And then when we're looking at that video, we noticed that our subject was doing this little strange maneuver with the knees every so often. It looked like a kick, a backward, like you're kicking somebody behind you, kicking somebody in the shins who's behind you. It's a little kick that was part of it. All 3 subjects actually told us this, but we weren't listening to them. But she told us that. I'm hearing it for the 3rd time now. She's doing that because she was getting cramps. This was the cramp relief. So if you have muscle that's on, blood doesn't flow when the muscle's tense. The muscle has to relax. When the muscle's under tension, the blood's not flowing. No. It flows during relaxation. It's called the heat of relaxation. So if you don't get a relaxation phase, your muscle's choking to death.
So the spasticness, if I'm understanding that correctly, that is the release to kick the blood back into the muscle to release the cramp.
She's trying to relieve a tension long enough to get blood flow.
And that's related to children with spasticity in their arms and their
interesting thing that they're doing, but nobody, because they're doing that because they're spastic or their brains screwed up. No, that they're having cramps, and the kids will not say they're having cramps because they'll do that enough to not get the cramps. Now I'm curious, and I'm looking at the first guy who gave up on us, and there he is, clearly, no doubt in my mind, toe walking.
Oh, whoa! Like a CP patient, toe walking,
internally rotated crouch gait. I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. We had sensors on the feet for pressure, but they weren't connected to anything above. There was no restriction of any kind. Just like little Band-Aids on the bottom of the foot that tell you when the heel was on the ground. The heel was never on the ground. So that now we have internal rotation, crouch gait, toe walking from an elastic.
Yeah, you recreated it.
We were joking. This is like Victoria's Secret garters gone mad, It's elastic. It's going from here to there,
You are so weird, Doctor.
No, but I'm saying like we're trying to make this makes no sense.
Right. Okay. So let's bring this back because I want to I'm fascinated. We could keep talking about this. I'm like, okay, then what happened? And then how did that then lead you to connect it all together? Okay.
Because when that was happening, I said, holy crap. We actually showed we didn't show the patient because they would give it away when they're wearing elastics. But we showed the graphs of the patient to some gait labs. And their idea to treat this person was femoral osteotomies, tibial osteotomies. There was foot operations and how to correct the foot, triple arthrodesis. And yet, that everything that this kid was doing was compensatory, 100%. This abnormality that you're seeing is what an athlete does to get around that elastic. Everything that you called abnormal, it's not normal in the sense that it's the usual thing to do when walking unfettered, but it's the correct thing to do when walking fettered. And if you're going to take away their compensatory mechanisms, because you think compensatory is wrong, it's not straight, it's not Pythagorean, it's just nonsense. And so in parallel with this, we get the cardiac kids, and here I'm doing as little as possible. And some of these kids, the semitendinosus is bowstringing big time. Just nip it, boom, easy to get. And they're better. And I'm saying, okay, what surgery did we do on the Irish girl? We did a semitendinosus release, the elastic. And she's got EMG wrong all over the place. She's got co-contracture going all over the place. What happens when you set the gain too high, which is what that elastic did? It set the gain so high that the body's shooting stuff all over the place and can't make sense of it anymore. Everything goes on.
And they just can't process anymore.
Yeah, well, you have to top the system out.
Right.
If you have take the best audio system if you turn the volume all the way to the top, are you going to hear the violins versus the drums and stuff? No.
Nope.
You can't do it anymore.
So you released basically when you removed that elastic, things went back to normal and the firing.
It took us 2 days before she was normal.
It took her body 2 days, though. That long.
Yeah. So after we took the elastic off in the lab, she wasn't back to normal. She was walking like there's a condition we call Prader-Willi. It's a super low. It's like a super low tone disorder. It's a genetic thing.
Sure.
It's these are kids who have like mush muscles.
Yeah.
They're not paralyzed, but they're just really low
tone.
Yeah, they tend to be heavy, and they just don't have a lot of muscle tone. So what they use is locking mechanisms to walk.
Yeah.
So that way muscle doesn't have to hold them up, and locking mechanisms.
And she looked like that.
She looked just like
when she came in. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. So it took her 2 days to get back
2 days to get back to, and all these publications that say that kids with cerebral palsy seem to have an abnormality of their muscle, not to the muscle, imposed on the muscle, beating the muscle to death. So you have a profound loss of ability. So they go so incredibly anaerobic.
Right.
It takes a long time to get rid of all the mush that's in there, and you have to reestablish the balance of anaerobic stores to non-aerobic stores. So basically, the heart is the limiting factor, and the ability of the heart to deliver the body to deliver what the heart puts out to the muscles is the limiting factor.
Okay. So that
energy.
That ties, energy. It ties that bow on that. So we talked before we started recording about how I believe Teal's ability to comprehend and her language is exploding, and the ease of which she's learning seems to be heightened, and all of that. It makes perfect sense now.
Right.
That you said, brain, here, and heart, we're going to give you. We don't have to work so hard anymore. You don't have to think about putting that forward.
You ever have a conversation in a room where everybody's yakking at the same time?
Yes. It's usually me, Dr. Nuzzo. It's usually me.
Okay, well, just take notice. You start to stutter. There's an experiment with telephones. You put a person on a telephone, and there's a little tool in there that brings a reverberating thing that has your own voice coming back, but at a delay several times.
Oh, yeah. No, you can't. It's horrible.
Right.
Even when you have one echo coming back, it's hard.
Right. You can't talk. Right. So it's
okay.
comparable to that. Same mechanism.
So that's why learning becomes easier for these children. Right. Even though you never touched their brain, you simply made these little optical surgical incisions.
I'm going to teach you piano.
Please do. I would like to learn.
Now I'm going to teach you piano. So now you go, first thing you do is you're going to hit some keys. And I've made this so that what a great piano this is. No matter what key you hit, they all play.
Oh.
Do you think even Mozart would learn to play piano?
Nope.
All right. So what we're saying is you're doing a slow, fast, and legs move fast when you're walking. Fast is the norm. So sitting there on the ground and seeing what your range of motion is, it's a nice number, but it's useless when it comes to walking. You tell me a person's range of motion, I have no idea whether that's good or bad for what they're doing. So when we're doing the SPML, we always have an assistant. We're doing the operation while it's moving, because we're looking for the parts that jump and resist during movement, fast movement, and the patients are close to awake.
That's what I was just going to say. You have to have low anesthesia then on those kids. Okay, go ahead.
What we do is we use the anesthesia to just get the IV in, and then we bring them up really light, and we use sedation. We get the IV in, and I put my local anesthetic in. I go scrub. Then they bring them up really, really light, because we need the reactivity. That's our target.
Right. You need to be able to see the motion.
Right. And feel how they respond to it.
Right. It was fascinating. One of the nurses told me when you were done with Teal, she said it was so cool because Dr. Nuzzo made one little baby like boop, and her leg in her groin, and she said her leg just totally relaxed and released.
Yeah.
And I can tell you something from just personal experience here. I didn't realize the lack of mobility that she actually had. Like, so I remember laying her on the hotel room bed after surgery, and her feet and toes were pointed out, and her hips were rotating, and and she was wide awake. It wasn't like she was asleep. Right. Everything was just relaxed and open. And I started crying.
The noise was gone.
I started crying because I was like, I didn't realize that I had never seen her legs in a, at that Oh my gosh. Okay. And now she sits like she was laying on her back the other day and her knees were totally splayed out. And I was just like, look at that. Look at this kid. So
So in essence, you're looking at a bunch of skills. I did not give her
I
those
know.
skills.
I know. But you did.
No, but I see. I can't allow myself to think that way.
Sure.
I have to stay in my own little box.
Yeah.
I think outside the box, but I have to be in the box. I have to say to myself, okay, can we do better than this even?
Right.
If I'm doing next year what I'm doing this year, then I'm doing something wrong. There's always room for an improvement. Always.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody's going to come up with some pill that does everything I do times 10. That'd be fine with me.
And you could actually retire and hang out.
Well, I retired.
Yeah, you're like, what? That would be boring. I don't want to retire.
Well, I had actually announced my retirement for this year. I'm supposed to be.
I know you're training a new doctor. Seriously?
Well, the thing was, I was going to retire. Then I'm going to take this after I'm retired. I'm going to take a trip down to Mississippi. Well, it turned out we had to book that a year in advance.
So you better keep working for another year.
Such an outcry from this. Oh my God, there's nobody to do the cases. So, in the backlog got so enormous. This other orthopedic group, God bless them, they said, "How about you train us and we'll use our block time?"
Oh my gosh. Yay. Will you talk to me about the salivary gland surgery that you guys are doing or aren't doing again?
This is kind of a sad one, but I wish somebody would pick up on it because it was Dr. Freifeld, ENT guy, who was, he's operating on the salivary gland. He actually wasn't operating on the salivary gland. That's the interesting part. He was doing this. He was doing the same thing I'm doing. Just think of the salivary gland as a muscle. You got a nerve telling something to do something, and it does something. It can either move a muscle or it can make spit. Right? It's just taking orders and doing what it's told. So the salivary gland can be spastic, and it behaves like a spastic thing. So bottom line is, he can go in under the eardrum, and if you're a person who does cochlear implants, one of your things you're trying to do is there's this nerve you want to avoid, because if you hit that nerve, it'll shut down the output of the anterior salivary glands. I'm saying, hey, we sure could use that. So it was another canceled case, and I'm sitting there, having my third cup of coffee, waiting for the emergency to get done, and he's sitting there the same reason he got bumped. But again, this is the ENT room thing, So his room was available, so he's sitting there with his feet up, and we're having this conversation. He says, "Well, if you want to stop this answer, all you have to do is just knock out the anterior thing." He says, "That's easy to do." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why don't you do it?" So he says, "Yeah, we could do that. It's not hard to do." He says, "It'd be." I said, "I don't know if they want to be on airplanes afterwards." So initially, we didn't know if a person had transtympanic when they go on an airplane. Turns out, no big deal. So we eased that in. It was the same kind of thing. He's there working through a microscope, and I'm doing my thing.
And what are the negatives? What are the potential negatives?
There's a whole big list of potential negatives, and we've never seen it even once happen, because you're not knocking them all out. You're just knocking the front ones out. And it's not like the salivary production is now insufficient because it was producing too much. It's not just that the kids are drooling because they don't know how to swallow the spit. Their volume is high. So if you take the volume down and you take the volume down in front, what they do they swallow. So we never saw loss of taste. We never saw a kid that got too dry. By the way, if you want to see too dry, the drugs, that's one of the problems. It dries up their eyes. It dries up their mouth. There's a lot of side effects. Virtually no side effects at all. The only problem we have is that Dr. Freifeld did retire.
Yes, he did.
And so trying to get somebody said, "Hey, you want to operate kids with CP?" And they go, that's the problem.
Okay.
So,
well, I'm going to try to remedy that.
Yeah, but basically, if you have a surgeon who can do cochlear implants, this would be like starting to do a cochlear implant without doing a cochlear implant.
Sure.
First little bit, just make it big thing. So it's for them. This is an easy operation.
Okay.
Outpatient also.
Right.
So anyway, I call them up to see how they're doing, and the mother says, "Oh, Sally's doing great. I can't believe it." It means she's walking. Oh, yeah, that too. But she's not drooling all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
The patients, when they've had the salivary thing fixed, because these are mothers whose wheelchairs have things to hold mops and saran wrap. They got things of saran wrap to put over communication boards and things. When they stop drooling, they just love it. If I had to say who had more patient appreciation, it's the kids who've had the salivary stuff done.
Well, it's a big social stigma.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, one of the kids who was doesn't talk at all, and I do the call up, and I'm listening, and I'm hearing somebody talking in the background. I says, "Darling, I know you learned to talk, but I'm on the phone with Dr." Boom.
After the SPML or the salivary?
I'm assuming it was the salivary thing. I can't take credit for somebody talking. I mean, what I'm saying is the ability to talk was there. It's that same thing. Okay, let's talk about one other thing to make sense of this.
I'm just going to say you're kind of blowing my mind right now. Okay, go ahead.
A stimulus can do things. Stimulus can make something do more, but a stimulus can make something do less. So what sometimes happens is while you're getting a strong stimulus to the quadriceps and to the hamstrings, very often the gluteus are inhibited. They get inhibitory stimulus. Okay. So seeing a decrease in activity of something could be a positive stimulus coming from somewhere else. Something is turning it off.
Right.
Holding your finger on something so it doesn't leak. It's being actively stopped.
Sure.
So a neurologic impairment coming from an inhibitory pathway. So that's not as bizarre a thought as it would sound initially, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We definitely saw it in the kids, the kind of talking. There'd be the kids who say, "Dr. Nuzzo, how are you going to operate on me?" They speak that hesitating speech. That's the bellows. The movement of air was coming in little bursts, trying to find these little relaxation points between the noise.
Yeah.
To get it done. So these kids very often get their jobs done in the holes in the noise. That's the way I look at it. Now let's be very honest. There are kids who have much more severe brain damage. They are the palsy, which is cerebral in origin, and they got a lot of problems. Yeah. And I'm not going to say SPMLs is a godsend for them. It's just that it's a whole lot less surgery, and it gets the need done. So for them, it's not that it's better. It's just that it's enough.
Right.
One of the things I've always learned is sometimes you just have to have a different pair of eyes. Doesn't it? They don't have to be smarter eyes, just different.
Mm-hmm.
This very large, well-known institution said, "Hey, they got a kid with this weird syndrome, but like this, we can't figure out what's going on, blah, 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 blah. The bones are doing this, but and it didn't make any sense to anybody at all." And what do you think? And they sent me a bunch of x-rays, and I took the first thing. I thought it's going to take me a day to go through these x-rays. My God, big pack. The very first x-ray I took out as I was lifting it up and on my way to putting it on the view box, I said, "Oh, scurvy."
Serious?
Had a kid with cerebral palsy. But the kid had scurvy. They were taking the hydrogen pump pills and the dietary changes that were made because the kid had a lot of the GI things on top of it. But there were 6 other meds going on that just confused the living hell out of the story. Sure. It turns out that the people who sent this, they have the only scurvy clinic in the world.
And they didn't recognize it?
This is what happens. It could be good, it could be bad to be in a groove.
Sure.
When it's bad, you call it a rut.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
So sometimes it's just a good idea. It's just, hey, show it to somebody else. I had a professor who told me probably the most important thing I've ever learned in my life. But I asked him, a simple question like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? And he grabbed me by the shirt. He says, "Come here." He looks out the window. He says, "Let's see that building over there. How many people over there do you think are doing research?" I said, "Hundreds." He goes, "Yeah." He says, "And you think they learn a new fact every single day?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah." He says, "You think in all the universities that are around, how many would you say?" I was, "Oh, Jesus, thousands and thousands." He goes, "Yeah." "And how many Nobel Prizes per year?" He says, "A lot of knowledge, but it doesn't mean we've gotten anywhere." He says, "The prize doesn't go to who generates the answers. It goes to who generates the right questions." Hmm. You're going to be a doctor, he says, and people are going to come to you because they're in pain. They have a problem and they don't have the knowledge that you have. They're going to try to describe it as best as they can, and they're going to synthesize it through what they know. If they think that everybody's made like a doll filled with sawdust, they're going to be saying maybe there's not enough sawdust. And he says, you're going to be told it in their terms. And he says, and if you give them an answer to their question, you're doing them a disservice. He says, what you have to do is listen and then say, knowing what I know, what should that question have been? Answer that question. I have to tell you, it just that like punched me in the face, that kind of logic. And I thought, wow, that's deep. But it turns out it's not deep. It's thorough. It's just everything. When you get information, don't assume the information is correct, but don't dismiss it as wrong. It's telling you something. but you have to say, what is it telling you? So when the person's on the floor holding their chest, I can't go on. Don't assume that they have heart disease. Say, you let my guard down. Was a better answer.
Fascinating.
So you always have to reinterpret what you saw. So something is not necessarily right or necessarily wrong, but we try to make mnemonics out of the facts that we have and try to put them into a picture. But sometimes it's the wrong picture. But you can't let that picture lock you into it. Right. That's the danger.
I'm gonna go ponder that for a while.
Yeah.
It's good. Well, I just wonder what questions I'm asking that is skewing my picture.
Well, this is Dr. Sandi. Give him credit. I'm just telling you what he told me, passing it along. This
has been fascinating. Seriously. I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been talking forever. It's just seriously, thank you so much for the amount of knowledge that you have in your head still that you've not even shared with us. Just kind of is scary. So I just really appreciate it. I know our listeners are just going to be so ecstatic about learning this straight from you. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found 1 or 2 meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or a caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.